I'm Geoff Foster. I'm the chief engineer, recording and mix engineer at Air Studios here in London. And what I do is basically take sounds recorded by musicians in the hall, which we have behind here, place the mics and get them onto whatever recording medium we happen to be working to. In the old days, it used to be tape. Now it's computer hard drives. For the last 15 or so years, I've been engineering for Hans Zimmer when he comes over. He does a lot of films in this country, partly because the musicians are some of the best in the world, and partly because of economic conditions have forced some work over here over the years. So as a result of that relationship with him and recording his scores, he has a fascination with samples. He loves technology. He loves the way they allow him to write and produce demos that kind of show off what he's doing to his directors prior to actually going into the recording process. Because of that, he has sort of built up a very extensive sample library, and I have over the last 10 or so years recorded in excess of 2,000 hours worth of samples for him in this room. I think for me, one of the personal highlights of working with Hans is actually not a particular highlight, but it's something that happens on every project, is that he's very, very keen that we invent new stuff, that we don't just rehash the same old, same old. And so sonically, he's very into the idea that we find new ways of recording things, we find new setups. And an example that springs instantly to mind is when we did the first Batman. The idea of this sort of two-note iconic da-da thing that everybody now thinks of as the Batman theme. And we talked about putting the musicians up in the balconies. So here at Air Studios, we have a sort of playing area, and then there's some balconies around the top, and we put brass here and brass here. And so there's this wonderful panning effect as they play between the two notes. And he's very much into that. And indeed, in this set of samples that we're doing now, for instance, one of the things that we're doing is we had our whole bass drums in the galleries and on the floor set up that we used on one of our earlier films. And so we've gone back in and we've recreated a similar thing to that, just because you get a different sound. It's something new, it's something fresh, and everybody's put a bass drum and a mic in a little bit of room, but not everybody has put one in a huge area like this and spread them out the way we have. So I think that the real excitement with working with Hans is the fact that he's very keen to push the boundaries, constantly doing something new. And I think that, that makes, from an engineering standpoint particularly, makes it very exciting. I have my personal favourite would probably be the first Sherlock Holmes that we did, because I think that had a sort of character and a spirit to it, and it was a little bit on the normal Hans, if that makes sense. Just the nature of the film and the nature of the way it pushed. The story pushed us into making a score that was not typical Hans, but it was very, it had the core elements of him. But it was fresh, it was bouncy, it just had nice character to it, and I think for me it would definitely be one of my favourites. I think with the way the business is going is that composers are now more and more dependent upon presenting decent demos to their directors in order to sort of get sign-off. People now like to know what they're getting. People are spending more money. And I think that the process, companies like Spitfire have sort of embraced the idea that you need quality, really quality samples that allow you to present your ideas, not necessarily as they're going to be, not as well as I still don't think that there's anything comes close to the real musicians playing most things, but I think is able to cross that bridge from the uninitiated who can't quite picture when someone plays a melody on a piano, that being a full-blown symphonic moment and a big action sequence, for instance. So I think that the idea of sort of allowing people to emulate what it's going to sound like to a certain extent, it's sort of pushing forward or broadening, if you like, the horizons of directors in terms of what they can actually expect and whether or not they are getting what they want. I think to a certain extent it is replacing some musicians, which is a bad thing in that there are some projects that are done that just become samples. But having said that, I think that the world of live music seems to have taken away, and I actually think that the public themselves are reacting against that, and I think it won't be long before the sort of the mood of the music industry sways back towards more musicians and some of the smaller budget projects as well, because there is something very real about real people doing it. And interestingly, that's one of the things about the Hans sampling approach, is that he's always about saying, I know it's just a single note, but I want the musicians to play it with passion. He cares about the fact that it feels like a performance. And we do labour to achieve that sometimes in a way that you kind of go, really, it's just a single note. But actually, in his libraries, I think you do get this sense that it's more like a performance than in some others. And Spitfire certainly have embraced that ideology, and their stuff very much, I feel, is the same thing. The idea behind recording these samples is to use the very best gear that we can and get the best signal to noise, get the highest quality into Pro Tools, which is what we're recording it into, and we're recording it in at the highest sample rate, highest bit depth, in order to then allow us to manipulate it with the best quality, and then it will be sort of downsampled to what will turn up in the Spitfire library. But the actual archiving, effectively, is a much higher sample rates. Out in the live area, I have approximately 90 microphones, which we are using 60 at any given point in time. Some of them are there just so that we can swap between sounds quickly. There's a selection of Microcephal, Neumann, Sennheisers. They're going through a Neve 88R with the Montserrat mic pre's. And then we've got Prism and Pro Tools HD A to Ds. We're running at 192K, and running two systems. One is a backup for the other, although there's always a certain amount of debate as to who prefers which A to D converter, so I'm sure there'll be some lengthy discussions about that. But so, yeah, basically the core sound, the room sound, is being caught on a selection of Decca trees. There's a small one, there's a sort of tighter space one, which is a M50s. Then we have a UM900 wider Decca tree. I have UM75s doing some outriggers. We have TLM 50s up in the galleries doing some very wide surround. TLM 170s doing surrounds in what I would call my usual surround position. And then for each drum there's a selection of spot microphones, and I'm trying to do a couple of perspectives, sort of a very close and a not so close, and sometimes a third one as spots. And then we have what we call kind of mid-rooms, which are about 6 to 10 feet away, which just give you the sound with a bit of space around it. And then we also have some B&K 4011s, or DPAs they now are, which is sort of hung over the sort of station, so in each of the stations where we have players. And again, that's just to give an alternate perspective. And when the stuff is mixed later on, those choices will be made between those, and different perspectives will be available. And as I said, in the future, it may well be even that the samplers come out with more access to the raw materials. I mean, there's a sort of data issue with how much data. I mean, I forget how many gigs we've done now, but it's well over a terabyte, and we're on day 2's recording, so not practical for most people. The idea is to offer the different engineers, because I know that Steve Lipson's having a mix at this, Alan Myerson's having a mix, to allow them to get in it the way they would. So I've not just recorded it the way I would record it if I was mixing it. I've recorded it so that, the way that I know other engineers would work. So there is this flexibility. And that hopefully will give these samples an added depth in that, you can take a perspective on them in a way that you wouldn't normally be able to. So the percussionists that we're working with today, I've been working with since I started working at Air, which is in 1987. And they have played on pretty much every soundtrack that's been done in the UK. They've done the Bonds, they've done the Harry Potters, the Star Warses. And we've got Frank Ricotti, we have Paul Clavis, we have Gary Cattell, and we have Steve Henderson. And they really are the best of the best. Fantastic team, really good-spirited and incredibly great musicians, which it's hard to you won't really see it as they hit a single note. But despite that, their musical ability is jaw-dropping.
Brilliant. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much, Geoff. Cheers.
Right, it's technically not my money. Chaps, Surdoos.